Christopher Bell wins his third straight race to start the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season, and I got a whole lot to say about the lawsuits surrounding NASCAR, 2311 Racing, and Front Row Motorsports. All that and much more on this week's episode of Mondays with Morgan.
Where do you go? Larson up top, all the way up top. Busher, he's on the outside. He's in position. He's got it.
Jimmy Johnson through 3 and 4. Make room. Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. There's another 7-time champ. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup Championship.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. We got another jam-packed show here on Mondays with Morgan, and it's headlined by Christopher Bell winning his third straight race this season. This race wasn't the Christopher Bell show for much of the early going though. We had William Byron starting on the pole, we had a couple of early spins and crashes, like Catherine Legg just spinning out all on her own, and then the Ricky Stenhouse-Cole Custer incident. Then the race slowly got into a rhythm. We had Joey Logano get a restart violation for going below the yellow line, which in my opinion was the right call. TV clearly showed it. He was on that line, so I don't have any problem with that. But then the big twist of this race, the option tire became a factor when Ryan Preece put it on and stormed his way up from, I think, like 33rd on the racetrack, all the way up to like the top 5 before the end of stage 1, which was won by William Byron. Stage 2 got underway, but then we quickly had a big one when Ty Gibbs slid up into Justin Haley and Chase Briscoe and just absolutely collected like a dozen race cars, including Carson Hocevar, who Spire Motorsports as a whole had started off the weekend so strong. Really sucked that he got involved in it. Same with Brad Keselowski and SVG. Then Joey Logano put on the option tires and stormed up to the lead. Many of us thought maybe he could hang on with those tires, but then Christopher Bell stormed right back up to him in the closing laps, passed him, won stage 2. Then we started having kind of those late race developing stories begin to come up, like the Catherine Legg spin again. This time she collected Daniel Suarez, though, which really just sucked. Daniel Suarez, using option tire strategy, had gotten himself into the top 10. And yeah, when Legg spun, there was just nowhere for him to go. Really sucked for Suarez. He's had just a rocky start to the year. Then we had rumblings of Ryan Blaney having an engine going sour, and Tyler Reddick began complaining about power steering issues, both of which those came to fruition as Ryan Blaney's motor exploded towards the end of the race, and Tyler Reddick just couldn't get that car to turn anymore without power steering, so he fell to the back of the pack. Then we had 2 brake rotor explosions, one in Bubba Wallace and one in Ty Gibbs. Ty Gibbs has just had an abysmal 10 weeks dating back to last year. Fox showed the graphic. His highest finish in I think the last 8 or 9 weeks is 16th at the Daytona 500. What in the world is going on with Ty Gibbs? Usually I save this for when we get into the results portion of the show, but I mean, the ship is almost sailing on if Ty Gibbs is actually going to be a contender. You can't go almost 10 straight weeks sub 30th and not having some skill called into question. We know Ty Gibbs can drive, we saw in the Xfinity Series, but that's beginning to look more and more like it was the equipment boosting Gibbs rather than his own actual skill. If Ty Gibbs doesn't get this turnaround by race 10, which is Talladega, the 2025 season is going to be a complete loss for him in my opinion. There's no way you can make the playoffs, at least on points, after having 10 straight just abysmal weeks to open up the season. Maybe he could finally get a win, but in terms of points, that ship would have sailed. But the Ty Gibbs brake rotor explosion set up a shootout with 2 laps to go, where Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson battled it out, and ultimately Christopher Bell pulls off the win once again, which leads me into my first question. Can anyone beat Christopher Bell this year? I mean, he's won at every style of track, a drafting track, a road course, and now a short track. I know he hasn't won in a 1.5 miles yet, but I mean, he could easily do that at Las Vegas or Homestead. I think there is, though, some drivers who can beat Christopher Bell, and it starts right away with the guy who's actually leading the points despite only winning 1 race this year, and that's William Byron. I think right now, we have the rivalry of the year going on right now. It's Christopher Bell versus William Byron, and then everyone else is just fighting for third. I think eventually, though, we will see Christopher Bell come back down to earth. I mean, we're going to Las Vegas. We're going to Homestead. You're going to see Kyle Larson. You're going to see Tyler Reddick probably compete for the win, if not win both of those races. We've also seen this many a times in the past. A driver gets really hot at the start of the year, but then kind of falls off as the season goes on. I'm not saying Christopher Bell is going to fall off, but it wouldn't shock me if he comes back down to earth and we start seeing maybe some other championship contenders begin to rise throughout the coming weeks. But let's go ahead now and look at some of the top finishers from this weekend's race. Christopher Bell, we mentioned, got the win. Denny Hamlin quietly gets a second-place finish. He wasn't really much of a factor throughout the race, but as the race went on, Denny Hamlin began to creep up more and more. Same with Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson at one point looked like he might be able to take the lead, but then kind of fell back, rebounds, gets third. Josh Berry has an outstanding day, gets fourth. Chris Buescher gets fifth. That's a nice day for them. They were kind of a 7th to 10th place team most of the days, so to come home 5th is a little bit above standard. William Byron, he got kind of trapped on pit road there under one of the final cautions, but he rebounds for 6th. Alex Bowman, 7th. Considering all the issues Alex Bowman's had at Phoenix, I think they'll easily take a 7th place finish. Kyle Busch in 8th, another top 10 for him. He's on a heater of his own to start the year. Really glad to see it. Zane Smith, a nice top 10 for him. Chase Elliott, quiet day, was kind of mid-pack most of the day, but gets a top 10 finish. Olive Hendrick in the top 10. Ross Chastain finishes kind of where he ran, 11th all day long. Austin Dillon, surprisingly, at 12th. We haven't really seen that much out of the 3-car to start the year, so nice to see it here. Joey Logano had to burn one of those option tires early on in the race, so that kind of set him up for a little bit of failure here towards the end, and he gets 13th. John Hunter Nemechek, the first couple of weeks, looks like the best Legacy Motor Club car to start the year. Gets 14th. Ryan Preece, using an alternate strategy, comes home with a top 15. Ty Dillon, at one point, looked like the kind of guy who was going to get a top 5, but then he sped on pit road, and just unfortunate that he couldn't rebound, but gets 16th. Todd Gilliland, 17th. Eric Jones, 18th. Austin Cindric, 19th. Tyler Reddick, even with the power steering issues, comes home with a top 20. While he probably deserved a top 5, it's nice to see that it wasn't all bad for him. Top 20, still pretty respectable, all things considered. But those are your top finishers. Let's move on to a couple more discussion questions here before we get into the big news stories of the week. NASCAR brought an option tire this weekend. We saw a lot of guys kind of dabble in strategy of when to use the option tire. A lot of the back markers use them early to try and move up through the field. We saw the front runners use their option tires late in the race. And really, I think a lot of people are asking, should NASCAR bring back these option tires? And I would say on the surface, it's a resounding yes. I mean, we saw the racing be fantastic. However, we've seen when cool things come around in NASCAR and we give it and we see it develop, these teams figure things out. They figure out the right strategies. And I think Ty Dillon is a perfect example. They hoarded those tires till late in the race, and then they just stormed through the field after a lot of cars in front of them had burned through their option tires. I think if NASCAR brings this back, we're going to see more and more of that strategy, and it's not going to really make the same impact we saw this week. So I don't really know if NASCAR should bring it back. I like when it does come back. It adds that level of strategy, but because it's so new, that strategy varies so much. If I were in charge, I would bring the option tire back, but I understand if NASCAR doesn't bring this option tire back, why they would choose not to. Overall, I thought this was a fantastic race. By Phoenix standards, it's a 10 out of 10. By any other track standards throughout the year, I mean, I've been pretty high to start the year. I would say that this race was a solid 8 out of 10. I mean, we saw the option tire do what it was supposed to do. We saw lots of strategy because of that. We saw cars coming and going, and we had a really great finish that wasn't manipulated in any way. I mean, that 2-lap shootout was caused because of a legit caution when Ty Gibbs had his brake rotors explode. So it's not like NASCAR threw a caution because we were 110 laps into a run and they wanted to see a 2-lap shootout. So yeah, overall, 8 out of 10 for me. Let me know what you would rate this Phoenix race down in the comment section below. The real story that I want to get into, and the one that I have been contemplating talking about because I don't want to focus on it too terribly much because I feel like we're already getting sick and tired of hearing about it, is the ongoing lawsuit between NASCAR and 2311 Racing and Front Row Motorsports. This week, NASCAR filed a counter lawsuit against both race teams. NASCAR claimed that the teams tried to bully other teams into not signing the new charter agreement, and that Curtis Polk, who is one of the head honchos at 2311, went and interfered with a broadcast partner of NASCAR's during the media rights negotiations. That, amongst other things, my main question about this is who will win in the end when all these lawsuits are settled. I have toyed with this, and it's going to be very unpopular, and I'm totally okay with that. I think NASCAR wins out in this situation. 2311 is a new team. They're not shy about playing hardball. Denny Hamlin's been very vocal on his podcast. The teams have tried to weaponize the media against NASCAR throughout this entire process. NASCAR has hardly said a single word unless absolutely necessary. I don't buy why 2311 and Front Row are suing NASCAR, that they feel like the teams are getting the short end of the stick. The teams in NASCAR, for I want to say almost 2 years, tried to work out these charter negotiations. And so for me, I look at it as, well, you had 2 years. You didn't like the terms that were presented. You got given a final offer. It was kind of a take it or leave it. And instead of leaving it and bowing out, you decide to sue because you don't agree with the terms of the contract that are presented to you. I'm also not a big fan of the weaponizing of the media. I mean, Michael Jordan literally said at one point, NASCAR will die if the charters don't become permanent. That I got upset by because, well, if you think NASCAR is this close to dying, why are you in this sport? Most smart business people don't get into something that they think is on the brink of dying. I'm not going to sit here and say that Michael Jordan is lying about the fact that NASCAR could die, but I'm going to say that I don't think NASCAR is nearly as close to death as he makes it seem if the charters don't become permanent. So for me, when I hear all this news coming out around this, I still feel like NASCAR has the stronger argument that 2311 and Front Row are just upset that they didn't get the contract that they wanted. NASCAR has given these teams more money than what they've had in the last several contracts, despite the fact that NASCAR probably didn't want to give them almost half the revenue from the TV deals, but NASCAR did that. I think the report was it was somewhere around 40% of the TV deal went to the teams to be split amongst them. This probably sounds really jumbled, and it probably doesn't make a whole ton of cohesive sense, so I'll try and sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences. I think NASCAR is going to win this lawsuit against 2311 and Front Row based on the fact that they had 2 years to try and work out this deal. 2311 and Front Row didn't like that. Meanwhile, 13 other teams did like it enough that they signed on to it, and ultimately the court is going to say 2311 Front Row, you had time to negotiate. If you didn't like the terms, that's not NASCAR's fault. So let me know down in the comment section below, do you think NASCAR will win this lawsuit, or do you think 2311 and Front Row have the better case? But that'll do it for this week's episode of Mondays with Morgan. Let me know what you think about everything we talked about, from the NASCAR race at Phoenix to the lawsuit surrounding NASCAR 2311 and Front Row. While you're at it, I encourage you to like and subscribe to this channel so you never miss any of the NASCAR content we got here throughout the week. Until next time, though, I'm Morgan Weeb. Have a good day, everyone.
Where do you go? Larson up top, all the way up top. Busher, he's on the outside.